The season's finally here, David. The Miami Hurricanes have a huge game at Florida. A really good opportunity for the Miami Hurricanes to gain some real in-season momentum, early season momentum. Florida State lost to Georgia Tech. So if Miami can get a win in Gainesville, it'd certainly be huge for the program, I think, just for this early season momentum that you're looking for. David, let's get right into this for the Miami offense. What do you think is the biggest key for the Hurricanes offense to have success against Florida?
Yeah, I mean, maybe this is a conservative approach. I don't know. But to me, I keep it simple on the road, one of the toughest environments in the country. You're facing, an SEC level defense. And so I want to keep it simple. And I think it's important to simply run the ball. Again, I think season openers are tricky. In college football, coaches kind of have a feel for their teams, but really they've only watched their own teams compete in scrimmages, right? So game one is an opportunity to learn about a coaching staff's own team in addition to who they're playing against, because they will also look different at the start of a new season as well, right? So I think the best approach in a lot of ways is keep things simple and effective. And I think that the best way to do that is to run the ball. And luckily, from a Miami perspective, I think it's going to be a strength of the team this year. With Damian Martinez, of course, the Oregon State transfer kind of leading the way as the feature back. And then Miami brings up back some big boys on the offensive line with Jalen Rivers, Inez Cooper, and Francis Maui Noah returning. So, control the game, take the crowd element out of the game. I think the way you do that is to run the ball. When you look at how Miami's performed against SEC teams here, the last handful of times, they've never had a 100-yard rusher. Now, that is hard to do against Power 5 teams in general, Power 4 teams, and especially against SEC level teams. But you go back and look at the stats, and it's not impressive. The leading rushing numbers. Last year, of course, Miami did beat Texas A&M at Hard Rock Stadium with only a 50-yard performance from Henry Parrish as the leading rusher. But what I kind of expect and what I think Miami will want to replicate is that 2021 Oregon against Ohio State game in which Mario Cristobal took an Oregon team into the horseshoe, and CJ Verdell ran the ball 20 times for 161 yards and two touchdowns. And Oregon won that day 35-28. They controlled the game in a matter where, CJ Stroud went off for 480 plus passing yards. And that wasn't enough that day because Oregon controlled things from a running perspective. So you have Damian Martinez to handle the workload. I would just ride him in this game. He comes from, Oregon State last year was the number one red zone touchdown efficiency offense in the country. And of course, I think you would agree, Chris. In the red zone, you got to score touchdowns. And to me, big people win in the red zone. Damian Martinez goes 6 foot 230, and he should, you should be able to get him in the end zone if you get down in the red zone.
David, a lot of good points there, and I felt like you were going to go that route. Certainly, that's something I consider as well. I get more into kind of my thoughts with it, but staying with this running attack, you touched on with Damian. Look, there's a lot of expectations for a lot of guys on the team. What do you expect for him, and what do you think about his abilities? For again, for people that are just kind of
Yeah.
tuning in, they know the name, the All Pac-12, performances, first team selections, both of us 2 years there at Oregon State. What do you think of his ability? Does he remind you of anybody? And then what can you expect in terms of a workload? I've touched on it briefly, or in the last few times I've been talking through videos about just kind of the workload I expect from him, because I do think he's going to be a guy that can get the ball quite a bit, and I think that that's what they're going to do, even though it's been a while since Miami's really had this true workhorse kind of guy in the program, that they've really relied on one guy. I know they want to get these other guys involved. I think Mark Fletcher will be ready. I think they will use him in the game. I don't think it's a smokescreen. I do think he'll be in there. Not sure if you agree with that or what you think, even though it's similar styles. But again, with Damon, what do you expect with him with his abilities?
Yeah. I mean, nowadays in college football, they do sprinkle around carries, right? And so, I think I personally, and you look at Damien's, you know, numbers at Oregon State, he doesn't have that many games where he did carry the ball 20 plus times, right? Just the way this schedule sets up though for Miami, I would give him at least 20 carries at Florida. And then, however that falls out, you give the next two games on paper, don't look too demanding. And so you can kind of take your foot off the gas with him in those games. But I would certainly ride him. I agree. I think Mark Fletcher's going to be in the game. What is his workload? That's where I think an interesting conversation is to be had. I personally wouldn't just toss him out there in a huge role because, I still think he needs to work his way back from a workload standpoint. And I think it's more important to have him ready for the entire season than just this Florida game. Um, but yeah, in terms of just the player I expect, look, all the feedback I got from fall camp is he was in the conversation as being the best player on the team in camp. And so, in the first scrimmage, he came out with a bang. First play of that first scrimmage, he busted a 65 plus yard touchdown run, set the tone that day for what was a dominant day for the offense. So I think he's a big time player. I think he has better burst, honestly, than maybe what people give him credit for. And I think he does run through tackles and he gets in a position to bust explosives. I think you go look at the advanced stats at Oregon State, his explosive run rate, what would be the best by a Miami back since I believe it was Mark Walton. So he does bring some explosive ability, even though he is 6 foot 230. Now, is he like a Lamar Miller sprinter in the open field? No. But I do think he breaks tackles and he has good vision and he does have the ability to put together those 15 to 25 yard chunk runs at times.
And I'm curious where they're going to find the success in the run game. What side of the ball? For me, I think the offensive line is going to take a little bit of a step back because with Matt Lee gone and Javion Cohen, I thought those were two really good players for Miami. And I feel like it's not just a given that the new guys stepping in will automatically be able to be good run blockers and pass blockers, although the other three guys are returning. So I think they're going to have to take a step up. But yeah, finding where
Go
he gets
right.
the holes. Yeah, go right with Cooper and Francis. I assume that's what you're going to say. And when we watch the highlights, we've talked about this before too, at his Oregon State days, when he got some good blocks by their guys, he was able to hit the holes and he was gone. And like you said, with that burst, I mean, you can really see it. And I'm sure that's exactly what they're talking about there with the Miami staff, with Mirabal and Cristobal. If we just give him a little bit of space and really provide solid blocking, he can kind of do the rest. And you touch on something that I've been hearing too. You said the word vision, and that's been something I keep hearing about his vision, and that it has been impressive. So we will see how that goes with the running attack. David, it's funny when I asked about the workload. You talk to people at UM on the staff and just kind of get their take on what they think. They'll tell you, I'm sure they're saying the same thing. We like all these guys, Fletcher, oh, this guy and Jordan Lyles picking it up, Chris Johnson, his speed. Look, there's only so many carries to go around. And I'm with you. I don't think you mess around with this rotation stuff, and I know that
Yeah,
that's
this game.
it could be what they do. I'm not sure yet, but I would, just as many as Damien can really handle and be effective as the game goes on, as he gets used to being in a Hurricanes uniform in this big game. I think he's the guy, and then you figure out the other stuff later.
Yes, I agree. And look, I do think the other guys are talented, right? But again, Mark Fletcher is still working his way back from his foot deal. Jordan Lyle is still a true freshman. AJ Allen, I think, is a change of pace back. But I don't think he's like a feature running back. I think that is his role. And to me, Chris Johnson is a gadget guy. So I would expect him to maybe get some looks in that role. So to me, I do think the roles are defined going into this Florida game. But look, they are going to give those other guys opportunities. It's not going to be, you know, Damian Martinez 30 carries and then a huge drop off like that. Plus, I mean, look, I think, in terms of carries and attempts, um, Cam Ward will probably scramble, right? So he will probably have a handful of attempts technically in the box score.
Yeah, Damian Martinez, 16 carries per game last season, at Oregon State. Okay, I'm going to answer the question, and for me, David, I'm going the other way. I think to me the biggest key for this game for the Miami offense is Cam Ward. I really there's so many fascinating things about him and a lot of attention. The ACC preseason player of the year. A lot of people ranked him as the top quarterback in the portal, or certainly one of the top guys available. The passing yards were high last year at Washington State. I think people want to give him a lot of credit last year and just chalk up to Washington State's, inability to win games or not have the success that you're looking for, and just say it was the program. And I think he gets I don't think he gets a lot of blame for it. A lot of it, even though 39 he took 39 sacks, I think people point to the offensive line. I think there's a lot of just a lot of attention on Cam and the NIL deal, all this stuff being a quarterback at Miami. And I'm fascinated to see how it works out because there's a couple things that are standing out to me. And the reason why I think he is the key for the Miami offense in this game is he is in a much different situation than he has either at Washington State or in Connor Word before that. They are the favorites going into this game. This is a big time matchup. He will be expected to win this game, and he's expected to perform at a really high level. It's a little bit different. He's kind of based on his recruiting and where the schools he's been out. He's kind of been this underdog guy to me, and I think right now I don't think he has that at all. I think he has a lot of attention, and with the just want to touch on a few things, some keys that are really standing out to me of him getting into a good rhythm. Is he going to try to do too much? Want to really impress everybody across the country, Miami fan base, and things like that. How soon can he settle into the game will be big to me. And then a couple other things. I think his pre-snap reads at the safety spots is going to be huge for him. Really making sure he understands the plays, and if they're trying to disguise some things, that he knows where to go with the ball. I think sometimes when I watch some of his stuff at Washington State, he gets into a little bit of a trouble, either trying to force things or, kind of going off his reads a little bit, whatever it might be, either forcing issues and kind of has either the interceptions or turnover worthy plays as Pro Football Focus kind of chalks it up as. And I think that'll just be key. Get into a good rhythm, making sure you have proper reads with the safety. I think that will be big for him. And I think as he goes, I think Miami's offense will go, and getting the passing game going will be very important in this one.
No doubt, he is the quarterback, so he is definitely very important to Miami's success as it relates to this game. And to me, the thing that I think he's going to have to contend with, of course, is the atmosphere, the environment of the swamp. And this is going to be the toughest atmosphere, road environment he's ever played in his life. I remember asking him at ACC Media Days, what is the toughest environment you've played into this point? And he said, I think he noted Washington, he noted Oregon, I think he noted USC. Look, Florida is a different level even from those schools. So he was looking forward to the challenge. He did say, I wish all my games were road games because I like shutting a crowd up. And so he does enjoy being that man in the arena. And you go back and look at, the Washington game and the Oregon game this past season. Um, he statistically outperformed those guys with Bo Nix and Michael Penix. Now those teams beat his team, but he did show up and provide statistically good performances in those games. But it wasn't good enough to win. So I do think one reason why he came back this year was to prove that he could lead a Power Four program to a 10 plus win type of season. And that starts with Florida. Let me ask you this, Chris, because I went back and looked, during this Billy Napier era, which is only 2 seasons at this point. You go and look at the quarterbacks that have come in to the swamp. What have they been able to do in terms of production? And I only really looked at the guys that are like NFL draft potential or NFL draft guys that have already been drafted. And really, most of these guys, they throw for 200 to 220 yards. Really, the only guy that kind of went off was Jaden Daniels, which I found interesting. And to me, look, that just kind of speaks. I'm not like trying to get in front of any excuse making for Cam Ward. You got to go out and produce. But to me, it speaks for how hard it is for a quarterback to go into this environment, handle the noise, handle the craziness, and execute at a high level. What do you think is a fair expectation in terms of like performance going into this game?
Yeah, that's certainly interesting. And as you were talking about some of his first, I want to kind of go back a little bit. As you were talking about some of his positive things, one of the games that really stands out to me was the UCLA performance last year, and not being able to really get it done. Or and the thing about the Washington State thing, they got up to number 13 in the poll, so they did have some positive momentum last year. David, with the with what you're saying with how quarterbacks, what to expect, I think just that efficiency. I think the thing is, too, a lot of the guys on the team speak so highly of Cam, and I think that's why it's important for him just to play well, be efficient, and I think that just kind of being in the game, being a lead. If it's 250, I think that's fine. I think that's good. The efficiency. I just think finding ways to win and make plays, regardless of how the game goes, and maybe not necessarily statistically, but just real efficient. Stay away from the interceptions, the forced bad throws, or getting sacked a lot, whatever that might be. Just make really positive plays to really show your teammates. Again, I just think he has a lot to prove, and that's what's really standing out to me. And if he can do all those things, because we know he does have the ability. It's not one of these situations where you're going in and you're not sure if they're good enough or what they can do. I just wonder how he's going to perform in the game, because I think his performance is going to be such a big thing. And I do wonder how he's going to embrace it. David, you touched on all the things he wants to do, and certainly the road environment, all of these things. I definitely think he wants to do all these things. He wants to lead Miami to a rare win in Gainesville, and that's the other thing. It's, as you touched on when I was thinking of, as you were talking about the other stadiums he's played in, it's not just playing at the Swamp. It's playing there in a rivalry game at Florida. The Florida fans loud anyways, but now you're bringing Miami into it, and that's a little bit of the difference. When he was Washington State, going to Oregon's much different than if you're Miami going to Florida, if that makes sense. Just the magnitude of what this is going to be, and it's the opener. Both teams are coming in, and the fan bases are excited for everything that it might be. So I just think of the efficiency, even if it's only 200 to 250. I think if he has less than that, it's going to be because of what you said. It's going to be because the running game is going, and they're doing well there, and then the defense, which we will get into as well, is having a good performance. So I just think that efficiency is going to be so important for Cam.
Agreed. Efficiency, protect the football. Again, and I look, Cam Ward's important. That's where I think Damian Martinez also helps, right? So it does all blend together in a lot of ways on offense. And look, quite frankly, another thing in the Swamp that's very difficult is red zone offense, right? And that was an issue for Miami last year in a lot of games, except for that Texas A&M win. Miami showed up and executed well in the red zone. So when you get down there, you got to get touchdowns if you want to earn a win in the Swamp, whether that's passing the ball efficiently with Cam Ward or letting Damian Martinez find his way into the end zone once you're down there in that short yardage area. So it's going to be interesting. I don't think it's a easy test. You can look at last year's stats and convince yourself that Florida's defense stinks. But to me, that was last year. And this year, I think Florida is going to be a pretty good defense. So I think it's a tough task in game one, in addition to this tough environment.
And also with Cam, I'm very fascinated to see how the playmakers work. And that kind of goes in line with Cam and the passing attack. Xavier Restrepo, for example, 85 catches a year ago, 6.5 per game. I'm curious to see his involvement. I know Cam has spoken so highly of the other receivers as well. Jacoby George is a guy that he's certainly, Sam Brown, getting him in the mix. Isaiah Horton, they think highly of, can kind of be up in there. I'm curious, how that's going to all play out. And I think it is important to kind of get those outside receivers the ball kind of early on in the game. So I'll be watching that as well. And that's kind of some of the things I was touching on a little bit earlier when I mentioned the pre-snap safety reads, because I do think it is important to get those outside guys involved early in the game. But another guy too, I mentioned those four receivers, Elijah Arroyo. I think it's so
He's
important
important this year.
for
Yeah.
him to be good in this game and really have his eyes on Cam and really kind of be ready to catch the ball. You touched on red zone things. I think if they're going to throw, I just think Elijah
Yep.
and his opportunities, however many he gets, is going to be very big in this game. So I think it starts at the top, David. We don't need to run down through the whole depth of the team because it's the top playmakers on the team with this offense that will determine if Miami's going to be able to pull out this win in Gainesville.
Totally agree. And I agree with you on Elijah Arroyo. I think it was a point of emphasis to get the tight end going this year. I think my understanding is he's had a good camp. So I think tight end production was not there last year. I think it's going to be there this year with Cam Ward delivering it to Elijah and the group in general.
Great. Thanks for watching, everybody. Definitely drop in the comments below. Let us know what you think is the biggest key for Miami's offense to get a win over the Gators.